Pregame.com.
NBA playoffs, Western Conference semifinals, the LA Clippers at the San Antonio Spurs. Stephen, I'm going to have the play on this one, and before I get to my play, which is going to be San Antonio, I got to ask you, is there a better team right now in the NBA than the San Antonio Spurs?
Well, I think it's, I could give you an argument with Miami or Oklahoma City, but I think all three of them are the teams to beat. But you may be right, San Antonio may be the best one right now.
They've played incredible basketball from the second half of the season on, and the job that Popovich has done with this unit this year, resting the players, getting them in and out of the lineup. This is a team for the first time. Have you ever seen Tim Duncan is healthy at this point of the season in the last 5 years?
I was glad to see Popovich win Coach of the Year because he deserved it.
Absolutely.
You know, he's done a great job, and the Spurs have been really strong down the stretch. But, Marco, since you've tipped your hand, you're going with San Antonio. We'll have to play a little devil's advocate here. 8-day layoff. I mean, have you ever heard of such a layoff? 8 days.
8 days, and you know what? You know, that normally you would worry about rest, but I'm looking at this team, and it almost was hard for me to even say Western Conference semifinals and say the word LA Clippers. It's hard to even say the Clippers in the playoffs, let alone moving on to the next round. I think this is a bad spot for the Clippers coming off that Game 7 where they had the opportunity to close Memphis out in Game 5, in Game 6, on their home floor, and then go and they win on the road. And you know the history of Game 7s. Home teams in Game 7s in the NBA playoffs are like an 80% play. Now I'm talking just straight up. They went in there and won that game, but I got to tell you, Stephen, I don't think they so much won the game as Memphis lost that game. Memphis was horrible in that game on Sunday.
Yeah, a real choke job by the Grizzlies. But you got to, on the other side, though, Marco, you got to give the Clippers credit for grit. I mean, Chris Paul, a hip problem, a groin problem. Blake Griffin on one leg, he can hardly move. Caron Butler's got a broken hand, he can't even feel his hand. They got bailed out by their bench, and we're talking about guys like Randy Foye and Nick Young. These are cast-offs from the Washington Wizards.
Well, you're making my case, sir, because this is what I've got here in my notes. The Clipper bench on Sunday scored 41 points. 41 points, while Memphis's bench only scored 11. That's one of the differences in the game. The other difference in the game is Memphis's atrocious shooting from the field. They were 0 for 13 from three-point range. You cannot win a basketball game when you're outscored by 30 points with the bench players and you go 0 for 13 from three-point land. That is not going to happen against the Spurs. And the other thing is the Spurs bench is deep. And this is the beauty of what Popovich has done this year, and it's why he did deserve Coach of the Year. By resting all of these players, he turned this San Antonio bench into, instead of a minute-eating unit that normally would come in and spell the big three, to now they are a good offense. They don't stop attacking when they go to the bench and give the key guys a blow now. This team keeps going, and it's why, if you look at the Spurs this year, the Spurs have scored more points this year per game than they've had in a long, long time. Usually it was the Spurs, you'd play a game, in the low 90s, upper 80s and play defense. This team scores 100 points on a regular basis. And I'm going to say Game 1, I think the Clippers are just going to be almost like, whew, we advanced out of the first round.
We survived.
Exactly. And I think the Spurs are going to come out. The Clippers might hang around for a little bit in that first quarter if the Spurs have a little bit of rest. But I think once they shift into gears and they get their sea legs back, I think it's going to be an ugly second half. And if you remember, Game 1 against Memphis, I remember it too well. The Clippers were down 27 points to Memphis in Game 1 of the opening series, and the Spurs are a hell of a lot better team than Memphis.
Well, using that, and I would, first of all, let me say, I agree with you. My mental take on that is, yeah, the Clippers are going to be gassed. They're going to have a lot of problems, trying to regenerate after that huge, Game 7 win at Memphis. But like we mentioned the Spurs 8-day layoff, which is huge. Memphis beat San Antonio last year in the playoffs and upset them, and now they lose to the Clippers. Plus, it's a whole different setup for the Spurs. They just disposed of Utah. Well, what is Utah? A bunch of big galoots in the paint, no outside shooting, not much of a bench. So now they're facing an entirely different team in the Clippers. Clippers are going to do a lot of pick and roll. They're going to shoot from the outside. So now the Spurs have to kind of, totally readjust. They didn't know really who their opponent was going to be, even though they had the 8 days off, so now they it's going to be a whole different focus, Not saying, they won't bury the Clippers. They have a strong record. You look at this, you go, wow, double digits already in the playoffs. But San Antonio, 10-1 against the spread. The last 11 times they've been, home chalk. So, they have the track record to back this up. But I think the random factor, Marco, is the 8-day layoff.
Well, like I said, I wouldn't be surprised for them to hang around in that first quarter because of the 8-day layoff.
Maybe just the adrenaline before it catches up to them and they're just roll over.
Yeah, then it's done. I'm going to go ahead and go with San Antonio. We're going to make the Spurs our pick here. The line is 11. My numbers have them winning by 15 Tuesday night. So let's go ahead and take the Clippers. We're going to be right back, Stephen and I. We're going to look at a baseball game for Wednesday here on pregame.tv.